The locket fell from her trembling fingers like a piece of his soul breaking free. Thomas Caldwell stood frozen in the doorway of his weathered cabin, the autumn wind cutting through him, as surely as the sight of that delicate gold chain pooled in the dirt at the stranger's feet. 3 years. 3 years since he'd buried that locket with Sarah, since he'd sworn no other soul would ever touch what had been hers alone. The woman swayed against his porch rail, her dress torn and bloodied, dark hair matted against a face pale as morning frost. She couldn't be more than 25, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much, lost too much, just like his. "Water," she whispered, the word barely carrying on the wind. "Please." But Thomas couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because there, gleaming in the fading light, was Sarah's locket, the one he'd pressed into her cold hands before the preacher said the final words, the one that should have been 6 feet under Missouri clay. The woman's knees buckled. She caught herself against the rail, and that's when he saw the blood seeping through her sleeve, the way she favored her left side. Someone had hurt her. Bad. "Where did you get that?" His voice came out rougher than sandpaper. She followed his gaze to the locket, and something flickered across her features. Fear, maybe, or recognition. It was my mother's." The lie hit him like a physical blow. He'd engraved those initials himself. SMC, forever yours, T. Sarah Mae Caldwell, his wife, his everything, his dead everything. The woman tried to step forward, reaching for the locket, but her legs gave out completely. Thomas moved without thinking, catching her before she hit the ground. Her weight settled against him, and for one impossible moment, she felt like Sarah, small and fragile and trusting him to keep her safe. "Please," she breathed against his chest, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. "Don't leave me." Her words broke something open inside him, something he'd kept locked away since the fever took Sarah. But as he looked down at this stranger in his arms, at the locket that shouldn't exist, he realized he was holding either a miracle or the cruelest trick fate had ever played on a broken man. Thomas carried her inside, laying her on the same quilt where Sarah had drawn her last breath. The similarity wasn't lost on him, the way this woman's dark hair spread across the faded fabric, how her breathing came shallow and desperate. But where Sarah had been golden and warm, this stranger was all sharp edges and secrets. He lit the oil lamp with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, then knelt beside her to examine the wound. A bullet had grazed her shoulder, and the blood loss explained her weakness. But it was the fear in her eyes when she caught him staring that made his chest tight. "You're safe here," he said, though he wasn't sure why he'd made that promise. She tried to sit up. "The locket. Later." He pressed her gently back down. "Let me tend this first." As he cleaned the wound, she watched him with Sarah's eyes. Not the color, but the way she seemed to see straight through to his soul. It unnerved him. "What's your name?" he asked, threading the needle Sarah had left behind. A long pause. "Elizabeth." Another lie. He could taste them on her like smoke. "Elizabeth what?" Her jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" He met her gaze, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with something dangerous. Trust, maybe, or the complete absence of it. "Someone's looking for you," he said. It wasn't a question. She closed her eyes. "Yes." "Someone who wants you dead." "Yes." Thomas set down the needle. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like fingers trying to get in. In the distance, he thought he heard hoofbeats, but it might have been his imagination. "I can have you patched up and on your way by morning," he said carefully. Or, he looked at the locket, still clutched in her other hand, at the woman who had brought his dead wife's most precious possession back into his world like some kind of ghost. "Or you tell me the truth about where you got that locket, and maybe I help you with whoever's hunting you." Elizabeth's eyes flew open, and in them he saw desperation war with calculation. She was weighing her options, deciding how much truth she could afford. Outside, the sound came again, definitely hoofbeats this time, and getting closer. Her fingers tightened around the locket until her knuckles went white. "They're here!" The riders appeared like shadows given form, materializing from the tree line with the practiced silence of men who'd done this before. Thomas counted 4 silhouettes against the dying light, their horses breathing steam in the cooling air. He recognized the type, hard men with harder reputations, the kind who got paid to make problems disappear. "Blow out the lamp," he whispered. Elizabeth's hand found his wrist, and her grip was iron strong despite her injuries. "They'll burn you out if they have to." Let me worry about that. But as he reached for the lamp, one of the riders called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. Thomas Caldwell, we know you're in there, and we know you got something that don't belong to you. Thomas felt Elizabeth tense beside him. The way they'd said his name, like they knew him, knew his history, sent ice through his veins. Send out the girl, Caldwell. This don't have to involve you. Through the window, Thomas could see the lead rider dismounting. Tall, lean, with the kind of mustache that belonged on wanted posters. The man's hand rested easy on his gun, comfortable with violence. You know them? Thomas asked quietly. Elizabeth's face had gone gray. The tall one's Marcus Dent. He works for... She swallowed hard. For people who don't forgive debts. What kind of debts? Before she could answer, Dent's voice came again, closer now. Girl stole something valuable, Caldwell. Something that ain't hers to keep. You hand her over, we'll be on our way. You don't... The unspoken threat hung in the air like smoke. Thomas looked at Elizabeth, really looked at her. At the terror she was trying to hide. The way she held that locket like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. At the bullet wound that someone had given her for the crime of... what? Stealing? Running? Or trying to learn the truth about a dead woman's jewelry? There's a root cellar, he said quietly, behind the kitchen. No, her voice was fierce. I won't hide while you'll do what I tell you if you want to live through this. Outside, Boots climbed his porch steps, heavy, confident. Elizabeth struggled to sit up, and that's when Thomas saw it, the way she moved, the stubborn set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes despite her fear. Sarah had looked at him the same way when the fever was burning her alive, but she was still fighting. The knock on his door came like thunder. Last chance, Caldwell. Thomas stood, checking his Colt out of habit. 4 men, 4 bullets. He'd have to make every shot count. But as he moved toward the door, Elizabeth grabbed his hand with both of hers. Please, she whispered, and there was something in her voice that stopped him cold. Don't leave. Her hands were shaking, but her grip was strong enough to anchor him to the moment. The locket, Elizabeth whispered, pressing it into his palm. Look inside. Thomas fumbled with the catch, his fingers thick with adrenaline. The knock came again, harder this time, rattling the doorframe. Caldwell! The locket opened with a soft click, and Thomas felt the world tilt sideways. 2 photographs. One was Sarah, young and smiling, the picture he had given her on their wedding day. But the other was a little girl with Sarah's eyes and Elizabeth's dark hair, maybe 5 years old, sitting on a porch swing he didn't recognize. Her name was Anna, Elizabeth said quietly. My sister. The words hit him like a physical blow. Sister. Sarah had never mentioned, but then Sarah had never talked much about her life before Missouri, before him. Anna May, Elizabeth continued, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. She always said she was going to find her big sister Sarah someday, going to see the woman who raised her until the county split us up. Thomas stared at the photograph, at the child who had Sarah's smile and Sarah's stubborn chin. His wife's sister, family he'd never known existed. She died last winter, Elizabeth whispered. Fever, just like Sarah. But before she passed, she made me promise to find her sister, to give Sarah the locket back. The pounding on the door stopped. In the sudden silence, Thomas could hear his own heartbeat, loud as thunder. But Sarah was already gone when I got to Missouri, Elizabeth continued. The neighbors told me about you, about how you'd moved out here after. They said you were a good man, that she'd loved you. So you came looking for me. I came to honor my sister's dying wish, to bring the locket home. She touched his hand gently. Anna stole it from the children's home when they separate. It was the only piece of Sarah she had left. Outside, Thomas heard the creak of saddle leather, the quiet murmur of men repositioning themselves. They were surrounding the cabin. And them? He nodded toward the door. Elizabeth's face hardened. I had to work for some bad people to survive, to earn passage here. And when I tried to leave, she touched her wounded shoulder. They don't like losing their investment. Thomas closed the locket, but he didn't give it back. Instead, he helped Elizabeth to her feet, supporting her weight against his side. The root cellar, he said again. No. Elizabeth, Anna. Her voice was firm now, stronger. My real name is Anna Mae Lawson, and I'm not hiding anymore. The door exploded inward with a crash that shook dust from the rafters. Marcus Dent filled the doorframe like a bad omen, his 3 men flanking him with guns drawn. But Thomas was ready, his Colt already in his hand. Anna pressed safely behind him. "Well now," Dent drawled, taking in the scene with cold satisfaction. "Ain't this cozy?" "You're trespassing," Thomas said evenly. "And you're harboring stolen property." Dent's eyes found Anna over Thomas's shoulder. "Girl belongs to Mr. Whitmore now, signed a contract and everything." "I paid my debt," Anna said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Not according to Mr. Whitmore's books." Thomas felt Anna's fingers tighten on his shirt, and something fierce and protective rose in his chest. The same feeling he had had when Sarah was sick, when he had fought the devil himself to keep her safe. "How much?" he asked. Dent smiled, and it was uglier than his scowl. "More than a dirt farmer like you got. Try me." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dent nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward with a length of rope. That's when Thomas made his choice. The first shot took the man with the rope. The second dropped the gunman by the window. Dent and his remaining partner dove for cover, returning fire. But Thomas had already pulled Anna behind the heavy oak table Sarah had insisted on buying for their cabin. The gunfight was brief and brutal. When the smoke cleared, Thomas was bleeding from a graze on his temple, but he was alive. All 4 of Dent's men weren't. Anna was staring at him with wonder and something else, something that looked dangerously close to love. "Why?" she whispered. Thomas looked down at the locket, still warm from her hands. At the photograph of the little girl who'd grown up to be the woman now looking at him, like he'd just saved her world. "Because," he said quietly, "family takes care of family." He pressed the locket back into her hands, but this time, she didn't take it alone. Her fingers laced through his, holding both the locket and him. "Please," she said, and this time it wasn't a plea, it was an invitation. "Don't leave." Outside, the wind had died down to a whisper. Inside, Thomas Caldwell looked at Anna Mae Lawson, Sarah's sister, his unexpected salvation, and realized that sometimes the dead send us exactly what we need to start living again. He didn't let go of her hand. The locket caught the lamplight between their joined fingers, and for the first time in 3 years, Thomas Caldwell smiled.